Hashtag birthday cake. The stage is set for tension. Mom's birthday gathering. The air in Mom's living room was thick, not just with the scent of her famous lemon cake, but with the suffocating expectation that always accompanied my military sister, Ava. It was Mom's 65th birthday, a milestone that should have been marked by pure, unadulterated joy. Instead, a palpable undercurrent of anxiety snaked through the pastel-decorated room, tightening the smiles of our extended family like ill-fitting knots. Mom, bless her heart, was radiant in her new sapphire blue dress, yet there was a telltale stiffness in her shoulders, a way she kept her eyes averted from Ava whenever the latter was speaking. Mom was the kindest soul on earth, a woman whose life had been dedicated to nurturing, but around Ava, she shrunk into a smaller, almost apologetic version of herself. Ava had arrived an hour late, perfectly on time according to her own internal, regimented clock. She didn't so much enter a room as deploy into it. Her civilian clothes, crisply ironed dark trousers and a sharp blazer, only highlighted her inherent rigidity. Even on leave, she carried the invisible weight of her command, a psychological barrier that made casual interaction feel like reporting for duty. She was a major in the army, a distinction she ensured everyone was perpetually aware of, not through boastful words, but through her every action and inflection. The moment she stepped across the threshold, she took command of the gathering's flow. "Dad," she'd barked, not asked moments after hugging him with a brief, efficient squeeze. "Those chairs need to be rearranged. People are crowding the kitchen entrance. It's a fire hazard." Dad, a man who built skyscrapers for a living, immediately scrambled to move the furniture she designated. Next, she surveyed the buffet table I had painstakingly organized. I'd spent all morning setting out the food, color-coded and labeled, exactly as Mom liked it. Ava barely glanced at me before zeroing in on a minor detail. "The gluten-free options," she announced to the room, her voice carrying the precision of a drill sergeant, "should be segregated entirely. Cross-contamination is a liability, not an inconvenience." Who handled the placement? I swallowed the retort rising in my throat. "I did, Ava. I used separate tongs and platters." She didn't acknowledge my answer directly. Instead, she took the sign I'd written for the gluten-free section and, without a word, replaced it with a pre-printed, laminated card she'd clearly brought herself. It read, in bold, military-grade font, "Allergy-sensitive zone. Do not mingle utensils. ****. It was this absolute, unchallenged authority that made every family event a tightrope walk. Everyone ceded territory to Ava simply to avoid the confrontation, the inevitable lecture delivered with the cool, analytical logic of a field briefing. But her domination was most pronounced, and most insidious, when directed toward Mom. Mom had been battling a chronic but manageable health issue for the past year. Ava, from her remote base, had decided she was the sole, ultimate authority on Mom's care, overruling doctors, our dad, and especially me, the sibling who actually lived nearby and handled the day-to-day logistics. "Have you taken your supplements today, Mom?" Ava interrupted Mom mid-sentence while she was chatting happily with Aunt Carol. "Oh, yes, dear. Just before the cake." "Actually," Mom replied, her eyes flicking nervously toward Ava's face. "Which ones, specifically?" Ava pressed, pulling a small notebook from her blazer pocket. "The B12 or the iron? And what time did you finish your water quota?" Dr. Jenkins specifically outlined. Mom's smile faded completely. She wasn't being cared for. She was being interrogated. It was a subtle dismantling of Mom's agency, treating her like a subordinate who couldn't be trusted with her own basic instructions. Ava wasn't present to celebrate Mom. She was present to supervise her. I watched this exchange from across the room, feeling the familiar, acidic burn of frustration in my chest. I had spent months managing Mom's actual medical appointments, navigating insurance, and ensuring she felt loved, not just managed. Yet, Ava's quarterly, one-day visit somehow invalidated all of it. The tension peaked just before the traditional cake cutting. Mom was unwrapping a handmade gift I'd given her, a collection of letters we had exchanged over the years. She teared up, genuinely moved, and started to read a passage aloud. Ava immediately stepped in, her hand resting firmly on Mom's shoulder, turning a private moment into a public spectacle under the guise of protection. "Mom," she said, her voice dropping to a level that was simultaneously gentle and controlling. "That's lovely, but you need to rest your hands. Doctor said no repetitive strain today. Let's save the reading for later. Now, let's get you positioned correctly for the photos." She didn't ask. She redirected. She physically maneuvered Mom away from the heartfelt gift and toward the cake table. Ready for the staged, perfect photo op, Mom's face, which had been beaming with genuine happiness moments before, settled into that familiar, strained expression of resignation. The stage was indeed set. Ava had consolidated her command, the family had retreated into passive acceptance, and Mom was subdued. All that was needed was one small spark, one final, egregious order, for the delicate, pressurized system to finally blow. I knew that if another command was issued, especially one directed at silencing me, I might not be able to hold my peace this time. #2, the flashpoint of contention. The atmosphere, already taut with Ava's insistent command over the birthday proceedings, finally snapped over something exquisitely mundane: the placement of the birthday candles. Mom was now positioned stiffly behind the magnificent lemon cake, her sapphire blue dress contrasting beautifully with the pale yellow icing. Dad was fiddling with his camera, trying to find the right light, and the rest of the family had gathered close, ready for the traditional happy birthday chorus. I reached for the small box of striped novelty candles I had purchased. They weren't the standard white ones. They were colorful, whimsical, and I knew they'd make Mom smile. "Hold that." Ava's voice sliced through the low hum of anticipation. She extended a hand, palm outward, an instinctive stopping motion she likely used on convoys. I paused, annoyed. "What is it, Ava?" "Those candles," she said, her eyes narrowing as she inspected the box in my hand. "They look flammable. Do they have a high wick-to-wax ratio? Did you check the burn time?"
I blinked her, incredulous.
"They're just birthday candles, Ava. From the party store. They're fine." "Fine is insufficient when dealing with open flame near a highly sugared, volatile material," she countered, her tone escalating from advisory to supervisory. She reached over, plucked the box from my hand with an alarming speed, and examined the fine print on the back. "Made in China. Unverified safety standards. We're not risking an accidental grease fire in Mom's house for aesthetics." Before I could mount a defense for the decorative novelty of striped wax, she produced her own box, plain, white utility candles, sealed in heavy-duty plastic. I came prepared. These are certified fire retardant, minimal smoke emission, guaranteed 6-minute burn time. She began pulling the existing candles out of the cake, the few my niece had already excitedly placed, and discarding them onto a nearby napkin with clinical efficiency. "Ava, stop!" I finally burst out, my voice louder than intended, cutting through the general chatter. "Those were fine. You are taking the joy out of everything. They were just little striped candles." Ava froze, her hand hovering over the icing. She turned her head slowly, her expression conveying the same chilling disapproval she'd likely reserve for a private caught shirking duty. "This isn't about joy, as you call it," she stated, emphasizing the word with disdain. "This is about risk mitigation. You've demonstrated a clear failure in situational awareness regarding potential safety liabilities. I am correcting an oversight before the flash photography begins." My temper, which had been simmering for the last hour under the weight of her incessant micromanagement, boiled over. "No. This is about you treating Mom's birthday like a military exercise. This is a party, not a tactical briefing. Can you, for just 1 second, stop being Major Daniels and just be a sister?" The room went completely silent. Every single person, Dad, Mom, Aunt Carol, even the wide-eyed children, snapped their attention to the two of us standing over the cake, the 2 candle boxes serving as the unlikely weapons in our verbal duel. Mom, seeing the rising tension, tried to intervene, her voice a nervous whisper. "Oh, honey, it's all right. The white ones are lovely. Let's just..." Let's just sing. Ava ignored Mom entirely, her focus locked on me. Your emotional instability is clouding your judgment, as usual. My name, she said, using my full first name, which always felt like a formal reprimand. My military exercise, as you mockingly refer to it, is what ensures order and safety. Your laissez-faire attitude towards potentially dangerous foreign imports is precisely why I need to maintain oversight. She then launched into a detailed, unsolicited critique of my contribution to the party. You failed to properly chill the champagne, you allowed the children near the good glassware, and now you're introducing substandard pyrotechnics. You've clearly demonstrated you are not capable of managing simple logistics. It was a total public dismissal, a calculated takedown designed to humiliate me and reestablish her dominance. The critique wasn't just about the candles. It was a character assassination wrapped in a safety briefing. My face burned. All the effort I had put into the day, the driving, the coordinating, the emotional support I provided Mom every day, felt trivialized. I managed the entire family's finances, Ava, and I got Mom to all her chemotherapy appointments on time, I retorted, shaking with indignation. I think I can handle a box of candles. You fly in here for 8 hours, issue 3 dozen orders, call me incompetent, and then leave. You have no idea what managing logistics actually entails in the real world. Ava stepped back from the cake, her jaw set hard. Her eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, flashed with genuine offense. She saw this not as a brother-slash-sister quarrel, but as an insubordination, a challenge to her authority in a territory she had unilaterally claimed. She was ready to deliver the crushing, final blow that would shut down the argument completely, the way she always did. She took a deep breath, puffed out her chest subtly, and prepared to issue the decisive order, drawing on the weight of her rank and her ingrained habit of controlling every situation. She looked directly into my eyes, and the 2 words that always silenced me were already forming on her lips. #3, the military sentence. The air was so still that the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Every face in the room was a study in nervous anticipation, eyes darting from me, trembling slightly with frustrated rage, to Ava, rigid and imperious beside the cake. My mother had raised a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with dread, perhaps reliving every single past confrontation that had ended with my humiliating capitulation. Ava didn't just speak. She issued an execution order. You are displaying erratic, insubordinate behavior, she stated, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that commanded immediate attention. She wasn't speaking to her brother anymore. She was addressing a poorly disciplined recruit in a restricted zone. The transition was seamless and terrifying. She leaned in slightly, emphasizing her dominance over the physical space. This is not a negotiation, and your emotional theatrics are unacceptable in this environment, especially in front of Mom on her day. She paused for a fraction of a second, letting the weight of her rank settle over the room like an oppressive blanket. She knew exactly what words to use to shut me down, words that always triggered an automatic, submissive retreat, words honed by years of enforcing compliance. Then, she delivered the final, chilling verdict, cutting me off just as I was about to defend my emotional theatrics. Her face was completely devoid of familial warmth, replaced by the steely mask of an officer whose patience had expired. Stand down. The 2 words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Stand down. It wasn't a request. It was an unqualified command, a requirement to cease action, to withdraw, to assume a position of readiness, but more importantly, silence. The irony was crushing. She had taken a phrase reserved for military operations, ordering troops to cease an immediate, high-intensity activity and return to a state of alert or rest, and weaponized it against her own sibling over cake candles and a perceived failure to manage logistics. She had reduced our entire, complex relationship and the sanctity of Mom's birthday to a chain of command. I felt the familiar, automatic physiological response. The tightening in my chest, the rush of heat to my face, the sudden, overwhelming urge to just turn and walk away, to let the argument die because arguing with Ava meant losing. It meant accepting the public shaming and the fact that, in her world, My feelings and contributions were less important than her ability to enforce order. For a moment, I was paralyzed. The command had worked perfectly. I felt myself deflating, ready to retreat into a corner, muttering a defeated apology for disrupting the perfect, orderly birthday she had envisioned. Aunt Carol quickly broke the tense silence by letting out a nervous, high-pitched cough. Dad cleared his throat and made a show of checking the camera lens again. Everyone was trying to pretend they hadn't heard the cold, stark command that had just been issued in a civilian living room. They were waiting for me to obey, to retreat, to defuse the situation as I always did. But as I looked at Mom, her face a heartbreaking mixture of embarrassment and helplessness, something snapped. It wasn't just the two words. It was the entire framework they represented. It was the years of being belittled, the years of having my opinions disregarded because they lacked the authority of military training, the years of watching Mom walk on eggshells. Ava's stand down wasn't just about silencing me. It was about protecting her absolute control over the narrative and the family dynamic. It was an insult to my adulthood, to my contribution, and most importantly, to Mom's right to an authentic, unmanaged birthday. The silence stretched agonizingly long after her command. Ava, seeing my momentary pause, mistook it for compliance. She even offered a curt nod, the official acknowledgement of an order accepted. She reached again for the white, utilitarian candles, ready to resume her duties as the self-appointed logistical officer. That nod, that assumption of automatic victory, was the final, devastating trigger. It was the moment I realized that if I backed down now, the stand down would become a permanent feature of every family gathering. It would validate her belief that she was perpetually in charge, and that I was perpetually her subordinate. The paralysis vanished, replaced by a strange, steady calm. The fear was gone, overwhelmed by a righteous certainty that this had to end. I wasn't just going to speak up. I was going to push back against the entire rigid structure she had imposed on our family. I wasn't going to retreat to a state of rest. I was going to enter the arena, fully prepared for the fight she had just commanded me to abandon. I drew a deep breath, preparing to launch the first real counterattack in over a decade. #4. The unexpected reply. The room hung suspended in the fragile aftermath of Ava's command. Ava was already turning back toward the cake, her hand moving automatically to insert her pre-approved, certified candles, assured of my customary retreat. Her back was partially toward me, a sign of her complete confidence that the matter was closed. But I did not move. I did not apologize. I did not stand down. A deep, unfamiliar calmness settled over me, replacing the frantic, buzzing rage. It wasn't the calm of surrender, but the stillness that comes right before an unstoppable force is unleashed. I looked past Ava, past the ludicrously contested cake, and focused on Mom. Her eyes were fixed on me, pleading silently for peace, yet shadowed by a desperate hope I hadn't seen before. I took one deliberate step closer to Ava, ensuring she couldn't simply ignore me and proceed with her planned agenda. When I spoke, my voice was low, steady, and dangerously calm, a pitch I had never dared to use against her before. It wasn't a yell, which she could dismiss as emotional hysterics. It was the sound of quiet, absolute conviction. "No," I said. Ava stopped her movement, mid-candle placement. The small, white cylinder of wax hovered inches above the icing. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice sharp, tinged with disbelief. She didn't turn fully, still treating the interruption like an irritating, minor delay. "I said no," I repeated, louder this time, but still controlled. I met her eyes as she slowly pivoted to face me, the look of utter surprise in her expression giving me a sudden, bracing surge of power. "I am not going to stand down. This is not a base. I am not a subordinate. And you are not my commanding officer," I stated, drawing a firm, unassailable line in the living room carpet. The shift in the room's energy was seismic. The children stopped fidgeting. Aunt Carol actually dropped her wine glass. Luckily, it was empty. Dad looked like he might bolt for the nearest door, caught between two warring forces. Ava's composure began to crack. Her lips pressed into a thin, white line. You are being disrespectful and insubordinate in front of the family on Mom's birthday. I issued a direct command to stop this unnecessary escalation. You issued a military command in a civilian context to shut down a conversation you didn't like. I corrected her, my voice gaining strength. That's not de-escalation. That's dictatorship. And I'm done with it. I gestured around the room, making sure my words resonated with the captive audience. This is Mom's living room. It is a place for celebration, for family, and for honest communication. Not for rank, not for protocols, and certainly not for orders. You leave your rank at the door when you walk in here. Ava. Major Daniels might command an entire unit, but she does not command us. I walked toward the side table where the discarded box of striped candles lay and picked them up, holding them aloft. These are just candles. They are a sign of affection. Your need to control everything down to the flame retardancy is choking the life out of this family. It's choking Mom. That phrase, it's choking Mom, hit its mark. Ava's face contorted, not in simple anger, but in genuine shock. She prided herself on being Mom's protector, the ultimate caretaker, and the accusation that she was actually harming Mom was a direct hit to her carefully constructed self-image. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "I am here ensuring her health protocols are met. I'm the only one taking this seriously. You're just coasting by, letting her eat sugary cake and use flammable candles. I take care of her every single day," I retorted, letting all the accumulated resentment pour out. I drove her to every single appointment. I held her hand when she was terrified. I deal with the real, messy, terrifying logistics of her illness. And I do it by treating her like a human being, not like a project or a private who needs to follow an SOP. My voice broke slightly, but I pushed through the vulnerability. She wanted the striped candles. She wants to read the letters. She wants a simple, joyful birthday, not a performance review, and not a field inspection. And if you can't respect that, then you need to be the one to stand down, Ava. You need to remember who you are when you step out of your uniform. The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken truths finally exposed. Ava was visibly stunned, her carefully constructed military facade momentarily shattered by the raw, civilian truth. She was used to defiance, but not this measured, public, and perfectly aimed challenge to the very foundation of her authority within the family. I stood there, breathing deeply, the striped candle box feeling strangely heavy and triumphant in my hand. I had finally spoken the truth that everyone else had been too afraid to utter. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time I hadn't lost the first skirmish. I looked at Mom again. This time, there was no fear in her eyes, only a profound, watery gratitude. #5. Consequences and connection. The air in the living room remained charged, but the suffocating tension had been replaced by a stunned, watchful stillness. Ava, Major Daniels, stood frozen beside the cake, her hand still hovering awkwardly near the icing, her sharp features registering a mixture of disbelief and wounded pride. The public, unprecedented challenge to her authority had landed perfectly. I held my ground, my heart pounding a rhythm of exhaustion and exhilaration. I had delivered the truth, and now I had to brace for the inevitable counterattack, the blistering, logical takedown that usually followed any defiance. But it didn't come. Instead, a painful silence stretched, broken only by the slow, deliberate movement of my mother. Mom, her face wet with silent tears that were neither sad nor happy, stepped around the cake. She walked past Ava, gently moving her sister's still-raised hand aside, and came directly to me. She didn't speak. She just reached out and took the striped box of candles from my hand. Then, with a quiet certainty that held more authority than any military rank, she began carefully placing the novelty candles into the cake herself. It was a small, profound act of quiet rebellion. Mom had chosen the striped candles. She had chosen joy over protocol. She had chosen my truth over Ava's command. Ava watched this scene unfold, her eyes following Mom's movements. Her jaw unclenched slightly, and the rigid mask of the officer began to soften at the edges. She saw not the insubordination of a private, but the genuine pain and desire for peace in her mother's actions. Finally, Ava let out a long, ragged breath, the sound of a carefully maintained pressure system depressurizing. She looked at me, not with the cold fury of a disciplined commander, but with the bewildered vulnerability of a sister. I didn't see it that way," she mumbled, her voice lower and less resonant than anyone in the room had heard it in years. "I thought I was helping. I was just focused on the mission. The mission is Mom's happiness, not her adherence to safety regulations," I replied, my own voice softening now that the immediate threat of conflict had passed. "And the mission is to be a family, Ava, not a unit." Dad, seizing the opening, moved forward and gently placed a hand on each of our shoulders. "All right, kids, let's stand together now, okay? It's Mom's birthday. Let's just enjoy the cake." The tension didn't dissolve entirely, but it shifted. Ava didn't apologize directly, but she didn't try to stop Mom, either. She simply stepped back further, relinquishing her position of command over the cake table. She remained silent as Mom finished placing the last of the striped candles, the whimsical colors looking defiantly cheerful. Aunt Carol, sensing the moment of détente, started the happy birthday song, and everyone, including Ava, though her voice was noticeably flat and subdued, joined in. The singing felt more honest, more genuinely celebratory than it had in years. After the cake was cut and the presents opened, Ava approached me privately while I was clearing plates in the kitchen. "I had no right to use that phrase," she said, leaning against the counter, her posture less rigid. "Or to talk to you like that. Not here." "No, you didn't," I agreed, not letting her off the hook, but keeping my tone neutral. "My job, my life, it's all about order. It's about control and mitigating risk. It's hard to turn that off," she confessed, looking genuinely troubled. "But I see now that it made you feel dismissed, and it made Mom unhappy. That was the opposite of my intention." I nodded. "I know you care, Ava. We both do. But you can't command affection or respect. You have to earn it in here just like you do out there. And you have to listen to us when we tell you what Mom needs." It wasn't a complete resolution. There was still years of baggage and friction between us. But for the first time, we weren't talking past each other with civilian frustration versus military protocol. We were talking as two adult siblings, acknowledging the damage caused by the power imbalance. That day marked a quiet, undeniable turning point. Ava didn't transform into a soft, wholly empathetic person overnight, but the boundaries had been established. In subsequent weeks, she called Mom less frequently to demand checklists and more often to simply ask how she was feeling. When she next visited, she didn't rearrange the furniture. She didn't critique my cooking. And crucially, the next time a minor disagreement arose, she paused, caught herself mid-sentence, and instead of issuing a command, she simply said, "Okay, let's talk about it." The stand down had been issued, but it was Ava who had finally stepped back from her permanent position of command, allowing the rest of us, and especially Mom, the space to breathe and simply be a family. The family dynamic was healing one civilian conversation at a time.